My parents called me Grandpa's charity case until a courtroom heard what Grandpa wrote. The word hung in the air, a stale, bitter fog that had permeated every corner of my existence for as long as I could remember. Charity case. My mother, Eleanor, wielded it like a scalpel, a precise instrument designed to cut me down to size without leaving a visible mark. My father, Richard, used it more like a blunt hammer, a dismissive grunt that accompanied the word whenever he had to waste money on me. It was the label sewn into the fabric of my life, a constant reminder that my place in the family was conditional, temporary, and largely resented. My name is Elias, but to them, I was just the burden they inherited along with the sprawling Victorian mansion. My grandfather, Augustus Blackwood, was a titan of industry, a man whose name was etched into the very foundations of our city. He had been the patriarch, the anchor, the source of all warmth and stability in my fractured childhood. When my parents' volatile marriage imploded, it was Grandpa Gus who had taken me in. I was 8 years old, a quiet, terrified boy clutching a tattered teddy bear, while my parents screamed and threw china in the next room. He saw me, truly saw me, when everyone else saw a problem to be managed. The house, with its creaking floors and towering bookshelves, became my sanctuary. Grandpa Gus was a man of few words, but his actions were a deafening chorus of love. He taught me the names of the trees in the orchard, the Latin roots of obscure words, and the quiet satisfaction of a perfectly tuned engine. He was my mentor, my confidant, my father in every way that mattered. When he died, suddenly, from a heart attack during a brutal winter storm, the world collapsed in on itself. I was 16. My parents swooped back in, their grief performative and hollow, their eyes already calculating the value of the silverware. They legally regained custody of me, not out of love, but because it was the only way to access the substantial trust fund Grandpa Gus had left. He had provided for my future, ensuring I would be cared for. But to my parents, that future was just a resource to be plundered. I have to pay for his school fees, Richard. The private school he insisted on. My mother would hiss to my father in the kitchen, her voice carrying through the thin walls. It's bleeding us dry. That money was supposed to be for our retirement. He should be grateful we don't just dump him in a state school. My father would grumble back, the sound of ice clinking in his Scotch glass punctuating his disdain.
We didn't ask for this. He's a drain.
A charity case. I heard them. I always heard them. Every new pair of shoes was a financial tragedy. Every request for a textbook was met with a heavy, theatrical sigh. They made my existence a transactional nightmare, a constant tally of costs incurred against the free money they received from the estate. They drove new luxury cars, redecorated the house, and took lavish vacations, all while complaining that my needs were ruining them. Meanwhile, I subsisted on a diet of being invisible, of taking the smallest portions, of wearing clothes until the threads were bare, desperate not to give them another reason to resent me. The only person who seemed to see the truth was my uncle, Harold. He was my father's older brother, a quiet, stoic man who lived across the country. He never married, never had children, and was the polar opposite of my social climbing father. He was the one who called me on my birthdays, sent me books with underlined passages he thought I'd find interesting, and after Grandpa Gus died, he was my only lifeline to the man I had loved. Remember, Elias, he'd say in his deep, rumbling voice. Your grandfather saw something in you. Don't let anyone tell you different. But it was hard to remember when I was drowning in a sea of their contempt. The final humiliation came on my 18th birthday. It was a milestone, a marker of adulthood. I had hoped, stupidly, for some recognition. I'd been accepted into a prestigious university, a place Grandpa Gus had always dreamed I would go. I had a part-time job at the local library, and I'd managed to scrape together a little money for my own expenses. I felt, for the first time, a glimmer of independence. I wanted to have a normal birthday dinner. Just one. That evening, I came home to find my mother in the kitchen, a single, sad cupcake with a solitary candle on the counter. Happy birthday, Elias, she said, her voice flat and monotone. We're going out to dinner tonight with the Hendersons. There's a casserole in the fridge for you. I stared at the cupcake. You're leaving? On my birthday? My father appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of exasperation. We have prior engagements, Elias. Not everything revolves around you. We already paid for your tuition deposit, didn't we? That's your present. I hope you appreciate it. I felt a hot, corrosive anger bubble up inside me, burning away the passive acceptance I had worn like a second skin. Appreciate it? I said, my voice trembling. Appreciate you using Grandpa's money and acting like it's a favor? You've done nothing for me. Nothing. You just took what he left for me and made me feel like I was a beggar in my own home. My mother's eyes flashed. How dare you speak to us like that, you ungrateful little wretch. We took you in. No one else wanted you. Harold certainly didn't want you, and the state would have put you in a home. You are a charity case, Elias. Always have been, always will be. My father stepped closer, his voice a low, dangerous threat. Watch your mouth, boy. You owe us everything. Everything I had held inside for years finally snapped. I owe you nothing. You are the parasites, not me. You stole my inheritance. You stole my life. And the only person who ever loved me is dead because of his own son. The accusation slipped out before I could stop it. It was irrational, a raw nerve of grief and fury. My father's face went white. The silence in the room was absolute. He didn't say a word. He just raised his hand and slapped me across the face. The sting was more than physical. It was the final severing of a connection I had never truly had. Get out, my mother whispered, her face contorted. Get out of this house. You can come back tomorrow to collect your things. We are done with you. I walked out into the cold November night with nothing but the clothes on my back. I spent the first night in a bus shelter, the metallic taste of blood and betrayal on my tongue. When I returned to the house the next day, my room was empty. My clothes, my books, my keepsakes from Grandpa Gus, everything was gone. My mother stood in the doorway with a garbage bag. We were going to donate it all, she said coldly, but you can have it. That was the day I became truly free. I called my Uncle Harold from a payphone, my voice shaking. Elias? He said, his voice immediately sharp with concern. What's happened? I told him everything. Through choked sobs, I laid out the years of emotional abuse, the deprivation, the final ignominy of being thrown out on my birthday. Harold listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. Listen to me, Elias, he said, his voice low and intense. I need you to be strong for a little while longer. I'm coming to town. I need you to meet me at the courthouse. Do you understand? The courthouse? Why? Because, he said, a grim finality in his tone, you haven't seen your grandfather's will. The one they read to you was a fraud. The real one was hidden. He knew your parents would do something like this. He saw it coming. I found it in his study after the funeral. I've been fighting this in the background, waiting for you to be old enough to fight back. Now it's time to finish it. I felt as if the ground had shifted beneath me. I had spent years feeling powerless, adrift. Now, suddenly, I had an anchor, a weapon. The courtroom was a grand, intimidating space, all polished wood and echoing silence. It was packed. My parents sat on one side, flanked by their expensive, silver-tongued lawyer, a man whose suit probably cost more than I'd earned in a year. They looked impeccable, composed, the picture of outraged innocence. My mother wore a pearl necklace, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, playing the part of the grieving, put-upon parent. My father's jaw was clenched, radiating a cold fury. On the other side, it was just me and Uncle Harold. I was in a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit, my hands clammy and shaking. I felt like a lamb being led to the slaughter. The courtroom was mostly filled with people from the city, lawyers, journalists, and curious onlookers. My grandfather's name still carried weight, and a lawsuit over his fortune was local spectacle. The judge, a stern-faced woman with piercing gray eyes, called the court to order. My parents' lawyer began his opening statement, painting a grotesque picture of me as an ungrateful, wayward youth. He talked about how his clients had selflessly taken me in, providing me with a home, an education, and love, only to be met with contempt and greed. He spoke of my father's deep heartbreak and my mother's psychological trauma at my behavior. They claimed the will was clear, the trust was for my care, and they had fulfilled their duty. They painted me as a grasping, entitled teenager who wanted to take everything from them. I listened, my stomach churning.
It was a masterclass in gaslighting.
Every word twisted the truth so profoundly that I began to doubt my own memories. Had I been that bad? Was I just a resentful child? Uncle Harold placed a steadying hand on my arm. Don't listen to them, Elias. It's their last dance. It's all smoke and mirrors. Then it was our turn. I took the stand. The lawyer cross-examined me, trying to break me, insinuating that I was just a troubled, greedy kid. He brought up small infractions, exaggerating them, trying to paint me as a delinquent. He mentioned the time I accidentally broke a vase in the house. A priceless antique, wasn't it, Elias? A family heirloom that you carelessly destroyed. It was an accident, I whispered. I was 10. But you never apologized, did you? You were always so consumed with your own needs. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Mrs. Armitage, objected. The court moved on. I could feel my parents' smug gazes on my back. They were confident. They had the money, the lawyer, and the narrative. Then Uncle Harold took the stand. He was a compelling figure, a man of few words, but when he spoke, everyone listened. His voice was a quiet rumble that filled the room. Your Honor, he began, the testimony you've just heard from my brother and his wife is a fabrication. A carefully constructed lie designed to defraud a child and steal a legacy. They have twisted every act of their own greed into a narrative of selfless sacrifice. My father, Augustus Blackwood, was a wise man. He saw the truth of his son's character. He knew that if anything happened to him, Elias would be left vulnerable. That is why he wrote this. He pulled a large, sealed envelope from his jacket. It was yellowed with age, the seal broken. He handed it to the bailiff, who presented it to the judge. My parents' lawyer immediately stood. Objection, Your Honor. This is not the original will. This document hasn't been properly vetted. It could be a forgery. Mrs. Armitage stood up. Your Honor, we have the testimony of a witness, Harold Blackwood, who was present when the document was placed in a safe deposit box. We have the bank records to prove it. The original will, the one my clients have, was an early draft, a decoy, placed there to mislead anyone who might try to usurp my client's inheritance. This is the final, legally binding document. The judge looked at the envelope, then at the lawyers. I will examine the document and the evidence of its provenance. I will make my ruling in a moment. She read through the documents, her brow furrowed. The silence in the courtroom was so thick you could hear a pin drop. My parents were leaning forward, their expressions shifting from smug confidence to anxious unease. Finally, the judge looked up. I have reviewed the evidence. The provenance of this document is solid. The bank records and the corroborating testimony of Mr. Harold Blackwood are compelling. I am admitting this document into evidence as the true last will and testament of Augustus Blackwood. A collective gasp rippled through the room. My mother's face went white. My father sank back in his chair, looking as if he'd been punched in the gut. The judge began to read. Augustus Ignatius Blackwood, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all previous wills. I bequeath to my son, Richard Blackwood, and his wife, Eleanor, the sum of $1 each, with the following statement. This is for all the love they gave their son, Elias. It is also a reminder that a man's worth is not measured in gold, but in the character he builds and the hearts he touches. Richard, you were never a builder. You were only ever a taker. A furious murmur swept through the room. My father was red-faced, sputtering. My mother looked as if she was about to faint. Then the judge continued. To my grandson, Elias Blackwood, who has my heart and my soul, I bequeath the entirety of my estate. All property, holdings, liquid assets, and the Blackwood Mansion on Maple Street. I do this not because he is a charity case, as I am certain his parents will call him, but because he is the heir to my true legacy. He is a man of character, integrity, and kindness. I watched him struggle and overcome the cold indifference of his parents. He has more strength in his little finger than they have in their entire beings. I am proud of him. I have always been proud of him. The judge's voice did not falter as she read the final, devastating line. I have left Elias the means to live a life of dignity and purpose. It is my explicit and unalterable wish that he use this to become the man I know he can be. And to my son and his wife, I leave them nothing more than the shame of their own actions. I saw you, Richard, and I saw you, Eleanor. You are a stain on my family's name, and I'm trusting Elias to wash it clean. The courtroom erupted. My parents were on their feet, screaming at the judge, at Harold, at me. Their lawyer was frantically trying to quiet them down, but it was too late. Their mask had shattered. The cool, collected, and aggrieved parents were gone, replaced by two seething, greedy individuals who had just been exposed for the frauds they were. My mother shrieked, her voice a high, keening wail that cut through the chaos. This is a forgery, a dirty trick.
He was senile.
That boy is a manipulator. He tricked his grandfather. My father lunged toward me, his face purple with rage. You little bastard. You ruined us. This is all your fault. You and your pathetic sob story. Uncle Harold stepped in front of me, his stance solid and unwavering. Don't you touch him, Richard. Don't you ever touch him again. In that moment, as the bailiffs moved to restrain my parents and the judge slammed her gavel, calling for order, I finally understood. I wasn't the charity case. I was the legacy. The emotional weight of it all crashed over me. The years of being called a burden, a drain, a waste of space. All of it was a lie designed to hide their own avarice. They had tried to break me so they could own me, and in doing so, they had only proved my grandfather right. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the validation. My grandfather had seen me. He had seen the boy who loved trees, who devoured books, who had a quiet resilience that he knew would see me through. He had sent me a message from beyond the grave, a declaration that I was not only worthy, but that I was the only one in the family who was. The court was cleared. My parents were escorted out, screaming obscenities and threats that fell on deaf ears. The legal battle would continue for a while longer. They would try to appeal, to contest, to drag it out, but in the eyes of the law, and in my soul, the war was already over. Later that night, I stood alone in the foyer of the mansion. It was empty now, save for my uncle. My parents had been given a few hours to vacate, and they had taken everything they could carry: furniture, silverware, paintings, anything they could sell. But they couldn't take what mattered most. The house itself was mine. The legacy was mine. Uncle Harold came up behind me and put a hand on my shoulder. Are you okay? I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. I don't know, I said, my voice hoarse. I feel hollow and full, all at the same time. He turned me to face him. Listen to me, Elias. Your father and his wife are no longer a part of your life. They are gone. They will come back. They will try to weasel their way in. They'll try to guilt you or sue you. But you're strong enough to handle them now. You always were. Grandpa knew it. I knew it. The only people who didn't know it were you and them. I looked up at the grand, sweeping staircase. I remembered the day I first arrived, clutching my bear, and how Grandpa Gus had knelt down to my level and said, "Welcome home, Elias. This is your home now." I had lost that home the day he died, but now I had found it again. This is it, isn't it? I said, my voice finding a new strength. This is my chance to be who he wanted me to be, to turn this place into something good, something that isn't a monument to his children's greed. Harold smiled, a rare, genuine smile. That's exactly what he intended. He didn't leave you the money to make you rich, Elias. He left it to you so you could be free, so you could be yourself. And in that moment, I understood my grandfather's gift was not the fortune. The fortune was merely the key to the chains my parents had wrapped around me for so long. The real gift was a clean slate, a chance to define myself without their shadows. The story didn't end with a fat bank account. It began there. I enrolled in the university, but I wasn't the same lost, frightened boy. I was driven. I studied law, corporate law, the kind my parents' lawyer practiced. I wanted to understand the system that could be used as a weapon against people like me. But more than that, I volunteered at a legal aid clinic, helping other children and teenagers who were trapped in abusive or negligent family situations. I understood their fear. I understood their feeling of powerlessness. I became their voice, the same way my grandfather's had become mine. I restored the mansion, not to its former gilded glory, but to something new. I turned the vast conservatory into a community library. I turned the stables into a workshop for at-risk teens, teaching them the practical skills Grandpa Gus had taught me. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a living monument to second chances. Years later, I received a letter. It was from my mother. It was a rambling, pathetic attempt at guilt-tripping me into giving them some money.
They had lost everything, she said.
Their friends had abandoned them. My father had lost his business due to the scandal and his own incompetence. They were living in a small apartment. She claimed they had made mistakes, but that I was family, and family forgives. I read the letter 3 times, my hands steady. I felt no anger, no sadness. I felt pity, a distant, almost clinical pity. They were the true charity cases now, begging for scraps from the boy they had starved. I wrote back a single sentence. Family is not defined by blood, but by who shows up for you in the dark. You never showed up. That was the last I ever heard from them. A few years later, I heard through the grapevine that my father had passed away and my mother had moved to a care facility. I didn't attend the funeral. I had already buried that part of my life a long time ago. I'm older now. I have a family of my own, a wife who loves me, and a daughter who is the light of my life. I tell her stories about Grandpa Gus, her great-great-grandfather, and how he was a hero who taught me to be strong. I teach her the names of the trees in our orchard. I give her the love that was so cruelly withheld from me. I made a promise to myself and to my grandfather's memory that the cycle of cruelty would end with me. One afternoon, I was cleaning out his old study. I hadn't been in there in years. It was a museum to his life, and it still brought me a painful comfort. I was taking apart the old, heavy desk, preparing to move it to the library when I found it. Behind a loose panel in the back, there was a small, leather-bound journal. I opened it. It was his personal journal. I read the entries from the months before he died. Elias sat with me in the orchard today. He asked me why the apples fell to the ground. I explained gravity to him, but he wasn't satisfied. He said, "But Grandpa, they fall to the ground so the new trees can grow. They sacrifice themselves." He was 8 years old. He understood the cycle of life and sacrifice better than most adults. He is not a burden. He is the future. I cried reading that. He had known. He had seen it all. My son is a fool. He and his wife treat Elias like an unwanted pet. They will try to break him, but they won't succeed. He has my strength, and I will leave him a fortress. He won't just survive them. He will thrive. He will build a new world from the ashes of their contempt. My legacy is not this house or this money. My legacy is Elias. He is the one who will remember. He is the one who will honor the past by building a better future. I closed the journal. The words were not just ink on a page. They were my grandfather's soul, reaching across the years to hold me once more. The courtroom had given me his money, but this journal gave me his heart. For the first time in my life, the sting of being called a charity case completely vanished. My parents' words had been a lie, a sickness they tried to project onto me. But my grandfather's words were the truth, a truth so powerful it had the strength to heal a lifetime of wounds. I am Elias Blackwood, and I am no one's charity case. I am my grandfather's living legacy, and that is a fortune no amount of money can ever buy.